What's up, everybody? We're back with episode 5 of Catch of the Day, the podcast where myself, Renfell, and Nathan Napalm talk about all things RPG, MMORPG, tabletop, and beyond for a little bit. It'll be a shorter episode today because we do have a guild meeting for World of Warcraft tonight, and then we roll right into our multi-stream group. So we'll be wrapping up here in about 40 minutes. Excuse me, coffee burps. Um, hope you're doing well, Nathan.
Yeah, doing good, man. How are you?
I am. So it was a I was getting prep for everything, and then Chris ran in here and she's like, the vet's got the thing going on today, and they're offering rabies vaccinations real quick. So she literally at the last like 45 minutes took all 5 cats to the vet and got all the new kittens got their vaccination shots for rabies, and then the 2 females are scheduled to get spayed on Friday, and then finally they're all fixed and they've all had rabies, and then all that's left is like regular vaccinations. So apart from that and like pouring down rain nonstop the last week,
Mm.
it's not been too bad. And they quit working on the internet, so knock on wood, I think all should be good.
Oh, good, good. Hopefully, the worst is behind you on that. It's a mess. It's
Yeah,
starting
they
to get
were.
ugly.
Hang on a second, let me post this live. All right. Yeah, they were working on lines and cables around here, so it's just unfortunate timing because I lost like 6 days of not being able to live stream. But we're here now. That's what matters. That's what's important.
Back up and going.
Yeah. So today's topic we're going to cover is matchmaking or matchmaking systems. Now I know this has come up a lot when we were doing our morning sessions, like Vanguard and the P99 group a few times, and there are some strong feelings about how matchmaking systems are somehow inherently bad and have taken away things like um, being able to instantly teleport to a zone. Well, the moment you do that, people say you've made the world smaller. I don't want to get instantly teleport to a zone. Um, and then there's things like it ruins socialization. And did it really? I mean, these are the types of things that we can look at. And the other one is that it ruins community. That's probably the number one that I've heard. But as we've gotten into more modern times, I don't necessarily think that's true. So I want to give some counterpoints really quickly, Nathan, and then I'll let you chime in really quick. So one of my favorite, I think right off the bat, is when someone says that the instant teleportation aspect of the matchmaker is something that ruined the game for them. They don't want to get instantly teleported to a dungeon. Um, they it makes the world small and everything else. But somebody brought up a good point. I think it was Maduros actually who brought this up the other day. He was like, what's the difference between getting instantly teleported to the dungeon by the matchmaker system or taking a flight or a fast travel option via a horse or a griffin or something else
Or a summon,
or a
or a
summon
yeah.
or at the summoning stone? What is the difference between any of those things? Because no one likes the downtime of 15-minute. Everybody complains about that when you have a long flight path and you're trying to get to the dungeon and you've got, let's say, a pickup group and people are antsy because they want to get going because they're on a limited clock. They've only got 45 minutes to play. No one wants to spend 15 minutes getting to the travel point.
Okay.
So when people talk about how matchmakers, the downside of matchmaking is the fact that you're instantly teleported to the dungeon, people say that they want long travel times. I don't think that that's actually true because when people have limited time to play, they're
Yeah.
always complaining about, oh, EverQuest is a good example. The boat takes 45 minutes. This is literally what has happened to our P99 stream on multiple occasions. Why don't we do the boat journey on our own time off stream so that we're not wasting time during the session to do the travel? So that would be my counter to that point. I don't know if you have any feedback on that.
Good one, man. Because I actually do sit in the camp where I think I think I do like that you have to travel to the place. Um, I kind of am in the middle though. From some people, I'm not in the real hardcore camp of it. I think after you've discovered it in some way, that having a shortcut after that isn't such a bad
I
thing.
agree. That one I agree with.
I do think that there's something that feels a little odd when it's like Final Fantasy 14 today. Well, no, that's not true because they make you discover it through the story quest. World of Warcraft retail today, where you can just you're this level, you can do this dungeon now, and you can just queue for it, and you don't even know where it's at. Like you have no idea where these dungeons are on the map, and there's something weird about that. Just sitting in town queuing up dungeons all the time. Um, that does make me my nerd soul a little sad. However, I'm kind of middle of the road because once you've discovered it, I don't see the problem if it's appropriate with the lore, I think is where I stand. So like mages can summon, or there's a summoning stone. It's a magical thing that allows you, but you need to discover it first, or whatever. Or even if you don't have to discover it first, but two of your group members need to be there to do it, to summon you. Those I kind of, because you're still going to the entrance, you're just using magical means to get there. For some reason, that doesn't bother me, but when it's just built into the UI, it feels like not as cool. And that's how I kind of stand on it. And that's being a very picky and very petty about it. But that's how I usually generally view it.
I think I'm on the same boat in terms of I think that you need to have gone there first and discovered it and then unlocked some sort of a fast travel option, which
Yes.
allows you to then use that option. Because it is, having never played retail before, and I just started playing WoW retail recently. As soon as I hit level 15, I think it opened up a dungeon finder and said you can now do dungeons. And I'm looking at the list, and it's like I've never been to any of these places. So why would I queue for these dungeons if I've never been there and I don't know the story or the lore or anything else about them? I don't even know the zones, but you can queue for them, and then it puts you there and then dumps you back where you started, which is the same thing that Star Wars: The Old Republic does. And
Sure.
it does
Most
make for
games, yeah.
fast paced gameplay, but I do agree that I think there should be some type of go there first. But if you've already done that, I don't have any problem with a matchmaker system giving you a fast travel waypoint to the dungeon because you've already done the travel time. Now, the other component that a lot of people will say is that matchmakers killed socialization. No one talks anymore. And I gotta say that is not, at least from my experience, that is not true. And I've seen Asmongold and other people talk about this before when people say that the matchmaker killed socialization. I don't think that's true because of a variety of factors. One, Discord allows for people to have out of game communication now. So there's no typing. Nobody types anymore. Who wants to type? I don't want to type. I type for a living. My hands hurt. I don't want to type. I want to use voice communications. And
Sure.
if on the rare times when I do a pickup group, it doesn't matter what game you play. It doesn't matter if the game has a matchmaking system or not. People join groups for one reason. They want to join to get the quest update. Once they've got the quest update, they bail. And for those who say that this only happens in matchmakers, there's a game that you've been playing recently, and I saw their
Hmm.
forums. Someone was complaining on their forums, on the Embers of Dirt forums, that no one wants to group up beyond the quests. They just want to get the quest updates and then they bail. And I laughed because that's a game that doesn't have a matchmaking system. That's just the way people play games these days. However, I can also say that Maduros has given examples of how he has found good raiding guilds in the past using the matchmaking system where he found a good group of people, liked the dungeon run, sent them a tell and said, "Hey, are you guys, available?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're recruiting." He joined their guild, had a good time. He's been in that guild for years. So
Sure.
there are plenty of opportunities to be social, but most of the time I find that it's the person on the other end. It's the person who says that the matchmaker is failing. It's actually them because they're not wanting to reach out and say, "Hey, how you guys doing?" Make a joke, chuckle, chuckle. It's more along the lines the human nature is to expect other people to do all the work for you, I've found.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so if you strip that out of the equation, I've noticed that I've done pickup groups the last few weeks, last few days, not few weeks. The last few days I've been doing pickup groups for heroics in this game, in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. And My groups have been as chatty and as communicative as any other game I've ever played, but only when I've been the one willing to start the conversations. Because I've also run dungeons where I've not said anything and it's just like dead silence, and the only thing anybody types in chat is /R, like, are you ready? Um, and that's it. Like, there's no communication. But if someone is willing to go out on a limb and be that outgoing person, I have found that the conversations are just as good as they've always been. But
Yeah. And you'll even with that said, on either end of the spectrum, which by the way, I actually fundamentally differ in opinion on this matter, but I will say to your point that for example, we have brought some brand new people from MMO 101 who's never played EverQuest into TLP when it was still fairly fresh, and they'd never played EverQuest before. They've never even played. Some of them never even played an old school MMO like that before. Um, and one of them, when we were reviewing, talked about how we were, because we had to level up in between the streams. So we had to go out there, get pug groups, whatever we had to do to get our levels. And so during his in between sessions where he didn't have a static group, he had always heard like EverQuest is a very social game.
this is Stands and
And
Fire, isn't it? I think I remember.
yes, I believe
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
Stans. I'm pretty sure. And he was talking about how he was like, dude, what are y'all talking
I remember
about?
this. Yeah.
I tried to start conversations and people literally ignored me in the pickup group. So that can happen too, right? And the reason I think that this happens now, when it kind of almost, it was very rare. Like everybody's free talking back then, but we also treated MMOs like a chat room back then. We really
Yes.
did. We were fresh off of chat rooms, were cool. Now we have a graphical world and chat rooms, right? We were really treating the game very differently than we do now. And like you said, voice chat. It's very likely that he joined a group of people who, the majority of them, were in a uh, guild and or in a chat room together, and they were talking, and they literally didn't see
I could actually
his
point to
chat.
this.
I can totally say that that's happened to me.
Oh, it
I don't
happened
know
last
this.
night because I ran heroics for like 4 hours last night with Maduros, myself, um, uh, who was in our group? Wolfen was there. Um, I can't remember. Oh, Grolar was there. So there was four of us, and we had a pickup as the fifth that had carried over from a previous group. We ran like 3 heroics back to back. I don't think we said a word to that person one time during the whole group. It was us for 3 hours chatting in voice chat, and that person was just there for the ride. They were probably watching Netflix, chilling, listening to music, and they never said a word in chat either. And it was totally like it was just they were there to get their objectives, and it didn't matter, I don't think, to them, or maybe it did. I don't know. I can't tell you because we
Yeah,
were
it's hard
totally
to know.
guilty of being in our own voice chat and not giving a shit. It was like
Yeah.
we were being social.
Now, I will say though, on the fundamentals of like matchmaking, is it good and or bad for socialization? I will say that I personally think that matchmaking. This is a situation where I agree with Blizzard, and that doesn't happen often. But when they did this classic Wrath of the Lich King, they decided, hey, this is when we introduce matchmaking. We kind of looked at the data. Socialization did go down after we introduced this. There was a loss of that server identity, etc. So you know what? Let's try it without it. Let's make a really fleshed out LFG tool, which let's be honest here, they literally stole it from some really awesome modders who made it in add-ons. They took that general premise and they made it, official. Basically, is what from my perspective they did, which whatever. And they made the LFG tool, which seems like it's almost the same thing, right? Except for there has to be a tiny bit of like, getting together, communication, etc.
Sometimes. I've also noticed that a lot of times
Yeah,
when I put myself up in that dungeon fighter, no one sends me a tell. I just get a random invite for the dungeon that I'm queued
can
for,
happen.
and then I get a summon.
Yeah,
Um,
which then you can argue like, what's the difference, right? Well, there is one difference, and we haven't really touched on this yet, and that's that these people are on your server. So you might run into them again, and people just knowing I might see this person again, I do believe there's something mentally that makes them behave differently. Um, when you're
yeah.
when you're at a grocery store in your own town, you're less likely to act a fool because your neighbors and or community is there. They might go to school with your children, blah blah blah, right? So you're more likely not to misbehave. But when you're out, away, far away, and I'll never see these people again, yeah, people tend to get a little bit crazier and maybe act up a little more. Um, it's kind of that whole old philosophy of nobody craps in their own bed, right? And I do believe that there's a little bit, not to say it's all the time, but I think that there is something to be said about I might run into these, or I might need these people again, or I might want to group with them again. Therefore, let me, behave myself.
There's the other component to this, which you just brought up, and I do want to mention this, is one of the downsides that people have often mentioned, or a downside they claim exists. This is, I think I need to put a caveat to that, a quantifier there, is that it ruins server communities, and that's one of the reasons they hate matchmaking in modern games because oh, you can group with anybody from another server, and that ruins the community because it gets rid of that server component. However, there is a flip side to that, which I think a
Sure.
lot of people fail to understand. So here's a good example, a perfect example of what I'm saying. So I just started playing World of Warcraft retail recently, right? Never played it before. I've been loving classic, so it got me wanting to play retail. Many of the people we are playing with, and many of my friends, have played retail and have characters on various servers. My brother has characters on one server, Maduros has characters on another server, you know, you've got characters on another server, Sparrow has characters on another server. People have characters on different servers all over the place. The greatest part about the matchmaking tool as it exists in modern day World of Warcraft is that I can group with any of you or all of you
Yeah.
at any point in time, regardless of what server we started our characters on, which is amazing to me in that the technology has gotten to that point because it didn't used to be that way. It used to be, it was, server only matchmaking, and then you could do multiple servers. Now the flip side is, of course, people who would argue the grocery store analogy that you use, which is a good analogy. Some people will argue that is the case, and I'm not going to disagree that that is probably more likely, given that it might be someone from another server that you're never going to meet again. But I would also argue that these servers are so big now that even if it was just your own server, when there's 20,000 people in a server, the chances of you actually ever meeting that person ever again are so small that it's just, in my mind, it's a non argument. Now, if we were talking old school EverQuest servers, when there's only, let's say, a
Yeah.
maximum of 5,000 people in a server and there's like 1,000 concurrent every night, it's going to matter a lot more. But I don't
It's
know
a
if
big difference, yeah. It's a
I,
big difference. And I
I,
think that's what people are thinking of when they say, I know I am, right? Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'll give you my most recent example, okay? Was when Final Fantasy 14 Realm Reborn first launched, okay? Now, their server size back then was much smaller. I don't know what it was, but I know at the time we estimated it was between 8 to 10,000 people per server. Now, it's expanded now as they got more money and funding and it blew up. But when it launched, it was somewhere in that realm, right? Which is a little closer to home to a older MMO you might think of. So I do know that I was on a pretty popular server. It wasn't the best, pretty popular though, and we did kind of know everybody. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but all the high levels, we all knew each other. Like, I could literally go to town and tell you something about every single person. Like, yeah, I grouped with him for this. Yes, that guy, he's kind of a douche. That guy sucks at DPS, but he's a nice guy. This guy, I mean, I literally could do that back then. Me and my wife used to do it, actually. We would go to, like, the main hub where everybody was waiting to do the in-game content because it was nearby where you had to go, and we would literally just talk about all the people that were there and like memories we had with them, or stuff we knew about them. So, but now, like you say, things are much different now. People don't, even that game isn't like that now. Um, in that game, you can hop servers. You can literally go to Crystal, go to another server. So that identity is kind of gone for that game. And I would say I miss it. I would say that was really cool how there was at least hundreds of people in that town and I kind of knew them all. That was super cool, and I do miss that. Um, but technology, actually, thanks to the matchmaker, in my opinion, is kind of what got that technology moving, where you could swap servers, where you could, which I do think is a good thing. Like, overall, at the end of the day, I think that having open servers or being able to play with other people, your friends, no matter what server they're on, is at the end of the day a very good thing. And actually less divides people.
I think the only downside, and this is I've thought long and hard about the matchmaking thing since people started
Sure.
bringing it up. I honestly can't see a single negative to the matchmaker other than as it exists in modern day games is what I'm getting at though. Not smaller servers. I'm saying like World of Warcraft retail, being able to do cross server, play with my friends, play with my brother, play with everybody anywhere regardless of what server they're on. I love that component because there's no limitations on where you can play. It's kind of like there's a giant mega server that we're all existing on with one limitation, and that limitation is the guild component. But if you break it down to it's you and your 6 or 7 friends, you don't have to have a raid. Excuse me, you don't have to have a guild to explore and experience all of the content that World of Warcraft has to offer because you can do cross server raids even, and the way they have that the raid instance finder these days, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's the matchmaker for
Right.
raids. It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
easy mode where they've stripped out most of the mechanics so that anyone can go in and do the story version of the raids to at least say they've seen the content and cleared the content. That is cross server, cross everything. So if you and your 4 or 5 friends ever get to the point and you're on these different servers where you decide that you want to do the raid, it's very simple. You put yourselves into the queue, you find or pick up raid, and you go do the content. You can at least say you've cleared it. Now, if you want to do mythical level content, then you're gonna need a guild, and that's when you're gonna have to make a decision to focus on a singular server. But I can't honestly see any downsides to matchmaking if we're
And I'm
talking modern games.
and I've played a lot of games where there was no matchmaker at first, then they added one,
Yep.
right? And so I got to see, both, and I know you have too. Most people have. I will say that when the matchmaker launches, right, I'm always like, wow, how convenient. Now I can just queue up. I don't need to do anything extra. Just queue up. I can do this is what I want to do, and I can just do it. And I always enjoy it for a little while. But then I always come back to feeling like, is convenience actually fun to me though? It's kind of not, because now I really feel like I'm just grinding now. I don't feel like I'm out. It's an adventure anymore. Now I feel more like I'm logging on. I got to do these 3 dungeons, and that's it. And I do my 3 dungeons, and then it's like, well, I'm done for the day. I'm logging out because that's what I need to do to get my little rep or to get my the particular case I'm actually thinking of to get my dailies done because I need X amount of tokens so I can get this piece of gear this week. Um,
One could
and
argue, though, that
okay,
that's an easily surmountable challenge because you could just choose not to use the matchmaker and play the game in an old school way. But the problem is that no one else is going to want to do that with you
mm-hmm,
unless you can
mm-hmm,
find a static group. Because the average everyday person is going to be like, yeah, fuck that noise. I don't want to spend 30 minutes traveling to a
right.
destination. I just want to.
When I don't have to,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. It's
And
it's the
some
flight thing.
people,
Yeah.
and some people, to be honest, and we all know this is true, a majority, I would even say, of people, they don't have a exact time that they can play. In other words, there is no I get home from work and from 6 to 9 every day I get to play my game. They have children, they have wives, they have work responsibilities that get a little wacky sometimes, and there just is no guaranteed time to play. So for those people, it's very hard to have a static because what's the chances their schedule that's random is going to line up with the other people that has also got random schedules. So for those people, unless there is a system for them to easily get a group and do something fun during the limited amount of time that they have on random times that they have available, they need something. Now, I think it can be completely solved with a really good LFG system like Classic has. I'm
However,
really hoping that everybody looks into it because I think it's pretty genius and mixed in some lore appropriate reasons of how people can travel the caravan system, for example. That
sure.
doesn't work for everybody, but that's a great solution.
So
Or even
EverQuest 2
just
did it too,
mages can
yeah.
summon stuff like that. Yeah.
EverQuest 2 has a looking for group system that's exactly like what World of Warcraft Classic has, and they've had it for years. You put yourself
Hmm.
into a list and you go from there. However, and I'm gonna quote Asmongold on this, um,
Okay.
a looking for group system like what Classic has only works if the server is populated
Yes.
and in a cross-faction game like what we have with World of Warcraft Classic, where you can't group with people from the other side, it also only works if the faction that you're choosing to play is populated on the server that you're playing on. If you strip those two things out of the way, you
Good
can't
point.
find groups unless there is a
Yes.
matchmaking system that allows you to go cross-server to find people from your faction. Now, they have gotten rid of that, I believe, with the most recent patch. The last few weeks, World of Warcraft now allows not only it's been months now where they've allowed cross-faction dungeon
Yes.
grouping.
Yep.
Now, as of I think like less than a month ago, they now allow cross-faction raiding for the first
Yep.
time ever, which means this whole idea of, I guess for me, I look at it and I go, there's nothing wrong in my mind with the more people playing a game, the better, because the more people playing the game, the more chances you have of getting to do the content that you want to do and finding people to do the content that you want to do it with. Because it would suck to be on a server where there's no matchmaker and no one's playing your faction, or the server starts to die off and suddenly you find yourself on one of those servers that's probably going to get closed down in 6 months, but you can't afford to switch because you don't have a $30 budget to pay for that character transfer, and so you just have to suck it up, and suddenly you're finding yourself not having any fun in the game because you can't find anybody to group with. But if there was a matchmaking tool that allowed you to do cross-server grouping, it wouldn't be a problem anymore, and it would be a stopgap solution until such time as they offer the free, server transfers. But that only applies on those low population or cross-faction examples. There could be other,
Exactly.
there are other
Yeah.
games that don't have faction issues where it's not going to matter if the population is good enough. But I can also say, having played EverQuest 2 recently, even with you, but even as recent, before the TLP server, I was playing, from time to time on the Antonio Vale server, which is an old legacy server. If you try to look for group on that server, on that legacy server, you're not going to find fuck all because there's no one there. The only people that are left on that server are the legacy people who have been around for 15 years. They're all at the cap. They're only doing cap content. They're not doing anything below the cap. So if you want to do like a level 30 dungeon or a level 100 dungeon or a specific piece of content, I have literally sat in that looking for group box for hours while I was working and not gotten a single tell from anyone. Meanwhile, I switch over to Star Wars: The Old Republic. I'm working, I'm playing, suddenly I decide I want to do a dungeon. I put myself in, and within 90 seconds, I got a group. And it's like, I love it. Like, I just, and might be where you and I disagree, is that I don't have the time or the patience to deal with the inconvenience of not finding something to do when I want to do it. Because I want to know that when I log into the game, I can make forward progress 100% of the time. Um, I don't want to be stuck trying to find people to group with. I want to be able to go do that thing now. And again, that's not an issue on a popular server like this, because if you try to look for group on our server on Peggle here in Classic, you'll especially if it's for like one of the dailies, you'll get a group in 90 seconds. Like, just people are constantly refreshing. Matter of fact, let me just pull it up real quick and I'll show. Like, I'll go to the group finder, and let's just say we want to look for a dungeon. We want a Lich King dungeon. Let's just click all the Lich King dungeons, and let's look at the group browser. Actually, let's do this. Go to dungeons.
That's good.
Lich
I
King
think
dungeons.
if you can move the window over to a little bit more towards the middle,
Oh,
so
I
the
can't.
chat can see.
Yeah, I
I
can't
won't let
move the
you.
window. Yeah,
Oh
well, I can
well.
move
Oh well.
my window, but I have to unlock it and everything. Anyway, there are. I'm scrolling down. You guys can see me scrolling a little. There's probably 30 people currently looking for group in Wrath dungeons. Now that's Wrath dungeons, which is capped. So let's look at Burning Crusade dungeons. There's only 4 people. So
Yeah.
this is the same issue that exists in EverQuest 2 because we're on an
Sure.
older server. Um, and it's the cap content. Yeah, there's 30, 40 people looking for group. There's only 4 looking for Burning Crusade. And if we look at, sorry, that was Burning Crusade Heroics. Let me refresh that. Okay, there's still 20 people for regulars. And then if I do regular dungeons, there's another 30 people or so. But still,
Okay.
it's fewer than it is at the cap. And there's chat I probably should answer to too. Sarkin says, when it's turned into a daily, all dungeons become speed runs where you kill a boss one time and then you're done. No slow crawl through. They become designed for speed runs. Star Wars: The Old Republic had cool mini dungeons for queues and big ones that required group. I felt like they balance it better than WoW in terms of feel. Well, I will also say something too. Some of that depends on who you're running with, because if you're using the queue, more than likely you're going to find people like what happened to me the other night when I did the daily, which was Azure Narab or whatever that dungeon is called. Um, you I went in with a pickup group, two guildies and the other three were pickup, and we got onto the bridge and somebody in the group was like, "Hey, do you mind if we just cheese this boss encounter?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "Oh, if you jump off the bridge here, you can pull all the mobs, break the encounter, and then we all run down. We don't have to fight these 30 mobs that take 20 minutes to clear through. We could just cheese them out, bug them out, run down and get the boss mob." And so we
Oh yeah.
did, and it cuts like 15 20 minutes off of the time
Oh
that
yeah.
it takes, and that's the way the pickup groups all want to do it. Now when you run it with the guild groups are more than happy to do it because we're all there trying to get factions, so we're wearing our tabards and we're killing mobs for faction or we're killing mobs for XP. So you're not wrong, Sarkon, that
Yeah, but I got to defend. And by the way, before I say what I'm about to say, I don't like dailies. I don't
most
like them.
people, yeah, a lot of people don't,
Most
yeah.
people don't. But let me defend it for a minute because there's a reason they exist. As servers get old, we were just talking about it, less people do the older content. Unless you incentivize a reason for high levels to still do the old content, which is why they do dailies. And that's why Final Fantasy 14, you can get a group pretty fast, regardless of how old that dungeon is.
Same
It's
thing here
because
because of the
the high
dailies.
levels need to do them too for dailies. They'll just say, hey, give me a random dungeon. It'll queue them with somebody's been waiting the longest. Bam, that person gets to do the content, right?
That is a
And
superior feature because they do it for all the dungeons, not just the cap
yes, all of
dungeons.
them. Right.
Yeah.
So you'll be running, and you've got a list every week as a high level. You need to run an old, level up dungeon. You need to run a group, bigger group content, older, middle of the road content, and newerish content. So you're doing every week a vast range. It's a random of each one, and so it just matches all these high levels with people that need the group, and then it makes them less powerful so that it doesn't they're not just one-shotting everything, right? They're actually having to go through the content. Now they're the best, like say it's a level 20 dungeon, they'll be like
It's like the
basically
mentor system
a
for
twinked
EQ2,
out
yeah.
level 20. Yeah, yeah. So and that's a smart system for to make sure everybody, no matter where they're at in the journey. I don't like it, but I don't think anybody's come up with a better solution yet for old content. And we're talking about instance dungeon content, by the way,
Sure.
too. You have to play a totally different ballgame with public dungeons.
Yeah, I think just at the end of the day, I think a lot of the complaints I've heard the OG crowd have about matchmakers only apply to old school games that no one's really playing anymore. Because all
Yeah.
of the modern games like Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, Retail, Star Wars: The Republic, they have kind of streamlined the matchmaking to where it allows everyone to get the most out of the game, to be able to make that forward progress, even if they only have 20, 30 minutes of time, to be able to do things with other people. The socialization aspect is somewhat reduced because I would argue more because of voice chat and the way we play games these days, not
Yeah.
necessarily because of the matchmaking
It
system.
is mostly that. And you may not know that because you don't know that because you're not on their end of the spectrum. But I can promise you, as a streamer who's on voice chat most of the time that I stream, that that I know for a fact I'm not trying to be rude at all. I literally didn't see that you said something because I'm watching my chat for my stream. I'm talking to the people and communicating, and I'm trying to be entertaining for the stream. And I'm just not. I'm glancing at it every once in a while, but there could be 30 minutes go by where I don't even look at the chat. And that's just because I'm looking at a different chat, right? That's important for what I do for a
It's
living,
valid,
right?
and I've seen people before who come into guild chat and they get a little cranky because they'll come in and say hi and no one answers them, and it's like
Yeah,
if you hit the O button and you bring up this, it's like, well, there's 30 people online, they're all in dungeons right now,
right.
and there's no reason to get offended if no one says hi back when they're all
Yeah,
in dungeons, because I guarantee you all of those people who are in dungeons are in Discord with each other,
sure.
running dungeons, not paying to group chat. And then if you add the streamer component to it, like Nathan just said, we're even less likely to be paying attention to guild chat and group chat because we're busy doing YouTube chat and hey, thanks for the super chat, thanks for this, thanks for the sub, thanks for the like, thanks for the follow, blah blah blah. Let's be entertaining. Let's talk to these people. Let's answer questions. We have a priority trying to make a living, and that makes it even harder to pay attention to
It
the the,
does.
the
It makes it
chat.
almost impossible. For me, it's impossible. I'm very like one thing at a time kind of guy.
Yeah.
So it's literally impossible. I'm not. If I see it, then it's because I'm focused on it, right? If I'm
Well,
not focused on it, I don't see it.
yeah. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, I want to wind this one down, Nathan, because we're about
Yeah.
15 minutes out from the guild meeting. I think at the end of the day, I just feel that the negative components that I've heard a lot of people talk about with the matchmakers don't apply in modern games, with the exception of like on World of Warcraft retail as an example. You can't be in a guild with people when they're across different servers, but that's an easily solved solution because the only reason you would need to be in a guild with someone these days, honestly, is if you're going to be going after that mythical content. Because when you can group with your friends, your family, cross server, cross faction, cross this, that, or the other, it's literally a mega server at that point where it doesn't matter where you're at. You can still group up with your friends and family at any point in time, raid with them, group with them, do content with them. What's the limitation at that point? It's it. I just don't see it. I will agree that if you're someone who likes the exploration component of a game, the instant teleportation can be a detractor, unless there was a game that would make you go to the place first, get attuned to it, and then you can use that instant teleportation. I wouldn't be against that because that would add the exploration back into games. So I can agree with that one as well. I can agree that that's sort of a negative because I do like to, because I've complained about this before. I feel a lot of the times the work of the world builders goes to waste when
Yeah.
people are just following a waypoint or they're getting instantly teleported somewhere. And it's like that's thousands of man hours that went into
Yep.
designing content that no one's seen because they're just getting teleported to the zone and then teleported back. But
And that's why games like Neverwinter exist, by the way, where it's just
yes,
straight up like just here's go straight to the place, no journey, just here you are, you're here, here's the action. Okay, now you're back in the city. Okay, now here's the next action point. That's why stuff like that exists because they sat and looked at the data and said, what's the point of making this overlaying content when that's not what nobody cares about that. And then you play the game, you're like, ugh, this is kind of lame. This is just way too instantaneous. And then they took it to the extreme.
yes,
But
that's a good example of
it's a
like the
very
extreme end
extreme
of the
version.
spectrum.
Yeah, way more extreme than retail WoW. Just way out there.
I've not
Didn't
even
even make the
used
content.
I've not even used the system yet in WoW, to be honest with you, but I'm looking forward to it because I love the fact that I've been told that I can complete the story lane in any way that I want to once
Yes.
I'm ready to do it. And that appeals to me as someone who is very much in favor of any sort of monetizations that make me get more out of a game and streamline my experience. Because if I want to travel to the dungeon, I'll travel to the dungeon on my own time. I don't have a problem getting instantly teleported to it if I know that I at least can go do it on my own. I would prefer to have that, flagging system where you got to go the first time. But at the end of the day, I think just like we were saying earlier, if you wanted to play the game a certain way, that option exists for you, as long as you understand that no one else is necessarily going to wait for you
Right.
to play it that way, unless you can find a static group of people to enjoy the game the way you enjoy it. So I don't know. I feel at the end of the day, I don't think matchmakers are as bad as a lot of people think they are when you're talking modern games. I think when you're talking old school games like EverQuest, it can't work because community sizes were so much smaller and it was a different game, different time, different type of gameplay, different way of playing. Those days don't exist anymore. As much as we might have nostalgia for them, um,
I'll say something else too. Some of the things that we look back fondly of only existed because of the technology. If they would have had the
limitations.
technology to do certain things that we do now, they would have done it even back then. So that's worth always considering too, is that the technology has changed and um, some of the things we love and adore only worked and was only relevant and only even exists because of the technology they had to work with at the time.
I agree. All right, folks. Well, here's where we're going to go from here so that you can follow along. First and foremost, every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Central, we do this show, followed by the multi-stream for our World of Warcraft group, where myself and Nathan and Sparrow and Maduros and my brother Entrador all play together, and we go into World of Warcraft. So you're going to want to follow along at our individual YouTube channels because we're going to be going live in the next 10 or 15 minutes here. Tonight's a special night because we have a guild meeting tonight because we're actually starting to set up to raid for the first time in Wrath of the Lich King. So we're going to be going over that. So we stream our guild meetings, and then we're going to be going and doing our multi-stream dungeon after that, which tonight is going to be the Nexus. So hopefully we'll follow us at those individual streams as we get going from here. Don't forget to follow along here to get more like this. On Sunday nights, tune in because myself, Nathan Sparrow, Bounty Code, Idrador, Chris, my wife, and Skinny all play the World of the Weave in the Void, which is that world map behind me. We're going into session 4 this week coming up. Every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Central. You can check that out. And of course, on Mondays, I do map making for the 5th edition tabletop setting. You can find more about that world over at patreon.com/wandering hermits. Pick up the tabletop book. It's got artwork from Nathan, artwork from my wife, and a bunch of other cool stuff. So hopefully we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And for those of you following along on YouTube, after this comes out later on in the week, you can like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon on YouTube so you get more like this. And don't forget to join our Discord. See everybody next week, or hopefully in the stream right after this.
Yeah.
All right, see you guys.
Bye, everybody.